She was hired to clean the mansion. Instead, she uncovered a past that nearly destroyed her. What happened next will break your heart. Stay with this story to the very end. It was a quiet Tuesday morning in Brentwood, Los Angeles. The kind of morning where the sun glides over glass rooftops and the air smells like money. Inside the sprawling mansion of billionaire real estate mogul Richard Langston, the staff moved like clockwork. Polished floors, imported orchids, and a driveway that could fit 20 cars. Everything screamed perfection. But something was missing. Richard stood by the window, sipping black coffee, watching the gate open for the new maid. She stepped out of the cab slowly, her figure graceful, her eyes wide with uncertainty. Her name was Elena Monroe, and she looked nothing like the agency had described. She was younger, more striking, with soft caramel skin, high cheekbones, and a quiet elegance that made the air shift. Richard's wife, Victoria Langston, watched from the top of the staircase. Her eyes narrowed. She had chosen Elena herself from the agency's list, expecting someone older, plainer, invisible. But this woman? She was radiant. And Victoria felt it immediately, the threat. Elena bowed politely as she entered, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for having me, ma'am." Victoria forced a smile. "We'll see how long that gratitude lasts." Richard didn't say much, but his eyes lingered a second too long. And that was the moment everything began to unravel. The Langston mansion had always been quiet, too quiet. But ever since Elena arrived, the silence felt heavier, like it was holding its breath. Victoria paced the marble hallway, her heels clicking like a metronome of suspicion. She watched Elena from afar, how the staff smiled at her, how Richard seemed lighter when she entered the room. It wasn't just her beauty. It was something else. Something Victoria couldn't name, but it gnawed at her. "Elena," she called one afternoon, her voice sharp. "Come here." Elena hurried over, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yes, ma'am." Victoria studied her face. No makeup, no jewelry, just natural grace. "Where did you say you were from?" "Pasadena, ma'am. I moved here recently." Victoria nodded slowly. "And before that?" Elena hesitated. "Just different places. I've worked in homes before." Victoria leaned in. "You seem very comfortable here. Almost too comfortable." Elena's eyes flickered. "I'm just grateful to be working again." Victoria didn't respond. She turned and walked away, but her mind was racing. She'd seen Richard smile at Elena. Not the way a boss smiles at staff, but the way a man remembers something. Something buried. Later that night, Victoria sat alone in the master bedroom, scrolling through old photos. She found one. Richard, years ago, standing beside a woman who looked eerily familiar. Younger, thinner, but the eyes, they were Elena's. Her heart thudded. Downstairs, Richard was laughing with Elena in the kitchen. Not flirting, just remembering. And Victoria knew. This wasn't just a maid. This was a ghost from his past. The Langstons were known for their lavish dinner parties, crystal chandeliers, imported wines, and guests who wore their net worth like perfume. That Friday night, the mansion buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses. Politicians, tech CEOs, and socialites filled the room, but Richard only had eyes for one person. "Elena," he called gently from across the room. "Could you bring out the Bordeaux?" She nodded, gliding past the guests with quiet grace. Heads turned. Whispers followed. Even the wives noticed, the way she moved, the way Richard's voice softened when he spoke to her. Victoria watched it all from the corner, her smile frozen. Her best friend, Madeline, leaned in. "She's stunning. Where did you find her?" Victoria's jaw tightened. "Agency. Temporary." Madeline raised an eyebrow. "She looks familiar." Victoria's heart skipped. "What do you mean?" "I don't know. Just something about her face. Like I've seen her before." Victoria excused herself and walked briskly to the kitchen. Elena was there, pouring wine with delicate hands. Victoria slammed the counter. "You're not here to charm my guests. You're here to serve." Elena flinched. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean." "You didn't mean to be the center of attention? You didn't mean to make my husband smile like that." Elena's eyes welled up. "I'm just doing my job." Victoria leaned in, her voice venomous. "You think you're special? You think you're beautiful? Let's see how long that lasts." Elena didn't respond, but her hands trembled. Upstairs, Richard was telling a story about a woman who once saved him when he was 12. "She gave me food when I had nothing," he said. "I never forgot her face." And in the kitchen, Elena whispered to herself, He doesn't remember me. Not yet. It was a Sunday morning, unusually quiet. The mansion felt colder, like something was about to happen. Elena was in the garden, trimming roses, her hands careful not to bruise the petals. She hummed softly, a tune Richard once said reminded him of his childhood. Victoria watched from the balcony, her fingers clenched around a porcelain teacup. She hadn't slept. Her mind was a storm of suspicion, humiliation, and rage. The whispers at the party hadn't stopped. She looks just like that girl Richard used to talk about, someone had said. Maybe she is. Victoria couldn't take it anymore. Elena, she called. Elena looked up, startled. Yes, ma'am. Come inside. Now. In the kitchen, Victoria stood by the stove, boiling water for tea. Elena entered, wiping her hands. Is everything all right? Victoria didn't answer. She stared at the kettle, steam rising like fury. You think you're clever, don't you? Elena blinked. I don't understand. You think you can walk into my home, charm my husband, and pretend you're innocent. I've done nothing wrong. Victoria's voice cracked. You've done everything wrong. And then, in one horrifying moment, Victoria grabbed the kettle and turned. The scream that followed echoed through the mansion. Elena collapsed, clutching her face, her shoulder, skin blistering, steam rising. The staff rushed in. Richard, hearing the chaos, ran from his study. He froze. Elena was on the floor, sobbing, her beauty scorched. Victoria stood above her, trembling, the kettle still in her hand. Richard didn't speak. He knelt beside Elena, his voice breaking. Oh my God, what have you done? Victoria whispered. She deserved it. But Richard's eyes were locked on Elena, and something inside him shattered. The ambulance arrived within minutes, but time felt frozen. Elena lay on the kitchen floor, her skin blistered, her sobs barely audible. Richard held her hand, whispering apologies she couldn't hear. Victoria stood in the corner, arms crossed, eyes hollow. The paramedics worked quickly. Second-degree burns, one said. We need to move fast. Richard rode with Elena to the hospital. He didn't speak. He couldn't. His mind replayed the moment. The scream, the steam, the look in Victoria's eyes. It wasn't an accident. It was punishment. At the hospital, Elena was sedated. Her face was wrapped in gauze, her shoulder bandaged. Richard sat beside her bed, staring at the machines. A nurse entered quietly. She's stable. But the scars, they'll be permanent. Richard nodded, tears streaming down his face. She didn't deserve this. Back at the mansion, Victoria poured herself a drink. The staff avoided her. Madeline called. What happened? Victoria didn't answer. She stared at her reflection. She was trying to steal my husband. Madeline sighed. You crossed a line. Victoria hung up. Days passed. Elena didn't speak. Richard stayed by her side. He brought flowers, books, soft music. He didn't know why he felt so connected, only that her pain felt like his own. One night, Elena whispered, Do you remember the alley behind the diner? Richard froze. What? You were 12. Hungry. I gave you bread. His heart stopped. I didn't think you'd remember. Richard stared at her, eyes wide. It was you. Elena nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I never forgot you. Richard broke down. And in that moment, everything changed. But the world didn't know yet. Not the media. Not Victoria. Not the millions who would soon hear the story. It started with a whisper. A nurse at the hospital told her cousin, who told a blogger, who posted a vague headline. Billionaire's maid hospitalized after mysterious burn incident. Within hours, the story spread like wildfire. By Monday morning, the Langston mansion was surrounded by reporters. Cameras flashed. Microphones waved. The world wanted answers. Richard stood at the gate, shielding Elena's identity. No comment, he said. Please respect her privacy. But the internet had no patience. Photos of Elena, before the burns, surfaced. Her beauty, her grace, her quiet presence. People speculated. Was she his mistress? Did the wife attack her out of jealousy? Who was this woman? Victoria stayed silent. Her lawyers advised it. But inside, she was unraveling. The world was painting her as a monster. And Richard? He hadn't come home in days. At the hospital, Elena watched the news from her bed. Her face was still bandaged. Her shoulder throbbed. But the pain wasn't just physical. It was the humiliation, the exposure, the fear. Richard entered quietly, holding a small box. I brought something. Inside was a photo, faded, torn. A 12-year-old boy sitting beside a teenage girl, sharing bread on a cold sidewalk. You kept this, Elena whispered. I never forgot, Richard said. You saved me. Elena cried silently. Outside, the media frenzy grew. Hashtags trended. Hashtag justice for Elena. Hashtag Langston scandal. Hashtag burned by jealousy. But no one knew the full story. Not yet. Richard looked at Elena. I want the world to know who you are. But only when you're ready. She nodded slowly. And somewhere deep inside, Victoria watched the coverage and realized she hadn't just burned a maid. She had ignited a movement. 3 weeks later, the Langston name was no longer just associated with luxury. It was scandal. The media had camped outside the courthouse. Protesters held signs. Justice for Elena. No woman deserves this. Burned by jealousy. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Elena sat quietly, her face still healing, her shoulder hidden beneath a silk shawl. Richard sat beside her, his hand resting gently on hers. Victoria entered with her legal team, dressed in black, her expression unreadable. The judge called order. We're here to determine the criminal liability in the assault of Ms. Elena Monroe. Victoria's lawyer argued it was a moment of emotional instability. My client was under stress. There was no intent to cause lasting harm. Elena's lawyer stood. She boiled water. She poured it. She watched her scream. That's not stress. That's cruelty. Gasps echoed. Richard was called to testify. He stood, voice steady but broken. Elena saved my life when I was 12. I didn't know it was her until after the attack. She gave me food when I had nothing. She didn't deserve this. Victoria's eyes widened. She hadn't known. The judge leaned forward. Is this true, Ms. Monroe? Elena nodded slowly. I didn't tell him. I didn't want anything. I just wanted to work. The courtroom fell silent. Victoria stood suddenly. I didn't know. I thought she was trying to steal him. I thought, her voice cracked. I didn't know she was that girl. The judge slammed the gavel. Intent or not, the damage is done. We'll reconvene for sentencing. Outside, the crowd erupted. Elena was escorted out, cameras flashing. Richard whispered, It's not over. I have something planned. Elena looked at him, confused. But Richard's eyes were clear. He was about to change everything. The morning after the hearing, Richard called a press conference. The media swarmed the Langston Foundation headquarters in downtown Los Angeles. No one knew what to expect. A statement, a settlement, maybe silence. But Richard stood tall behind the podium, Elena beside him, her face still healing, her eyes calm but guarded. I want to thank everyone for their support, he began. But this isn't just about one incident. It's about something deeper. He paused, looking at Elena. Years ago, when I was 12, I was homeless. I slept behind diners, begged for scraps. One night, a girl gave me bread. She didn't ask questions. She just helped. Gasps rippled through the crowd. That girl, Richard continued, voice trembling, is Elena Monroe. And I didn't know it until after she was hurt in my home. Elena looked down, tears slipping silently. I owe her everything, Richard said. And now, I want to honor her. He turned to the screen behind him. It lit up with a logo, the Monroe Initiative. A new foundation, Richard said, dedicated to helping women who've suffered abuse, violence, and injustice. We're starting with a $50 million endowment. The crowd erupted. Elena whispered, I didn't ask for this. Richard smiled. You didn't have to. Victoria watched from her penthouse, stunned. Her phone buzzed with messages. You've been replaced, one read. He's building a legacy, without you. But Richard wasn't thinking about revenge. He was thinking about redemption. And Elena? She was still processing it all. The pain, the scars, the sudden spotlight. But something inside her shifted. She wasn't just a maid anymore. She was a symbol, and the world was watching. Victoria hadn't left her penthouse in days. The world had turned against her. Headlines called her the jealous heiress. Talk shows dissected her every move. Her name was poison. But she wasn't done. She requested a private meeting with Elena. No cameras, no lawyers. Just the two of them. Richard hesitated. Are you sure? Elena nodded. I need to hear it. They met at the Langston mansion, in the same kitchen where it all happened. Victoria stood by the window, arms folded, eyes tired. Elena entered slowly, her scars hidden beneath a silk scarf. Victoria didn't speak at first. She just stared. You were the girl from the alley? Elena nodded. I didn't know, Victoria whispered. I thought you were something else. Elena's voice was calm. You thought I was stealing your husband. Victoria turned. He was mine. For years. And then you came, and he smiled differently. He looked at you like he remembered something beautiful. Elena's eyes welled up. I never wanted him. I just wanted to work. To survive. Victoria broke. I was scared. I saw you, and I saw everything I wasn't. I saw youth, beauty, kindness, and I hated it. Elena stepped closer. You didn't just hate me. You tried to erase me. Victoria collapsed into a chair, sobbing. I ruined your face. I ruined your life. Elena knelt beside her. You didn't ruin me. You revealed me. Victoria looked up, stunned. I was invisible, Elena said. Now, the world sees me. And not because I'm beautiful, but because I survived. Victoria cried harder. And for the first time, Elena reached out, not in forgiveness, but in strength. I'm not your enemy, she whispered. I'm your mirror. Victoria nodded, broken. And outside, Richard watched silently, knowing the final chapter was near. 6 months later, the Monroe Initiative had become a national movement. Shelters were built. Scholarships were funded. Survivors found voices. Elena became a quiet icon, not for her beauty, but for her resilience. She rarely spoke publicly, but when she did, people listened. Richard had stepped back from the spotlight. He focused on the foundation, on healing, on rebuilding. The mansion was quieter now. Victoria had moved out. Her name faded from headlines, her legacy rewritten. One afternoon, Elena stood in front of a crowd at a new shelter opening in Chicago. Her scars were visible now, no longer hidden. She wore them like armor. I used to think scars were shameful, she said. But they're proof that we survived. The crowd applauded. Later that evening, Richard joined her on the rooftop. The city lights shimmered below. He handed her a letter, old, yellowed, folded. I found this in my childhood box, he said. It's from the diner owner. He wrote about the girl who fed me. Said she came back every night, just in case I returned. Elena smiled softly. I did. Richard's voice cracked. You saved me twice. Once with bread, once with grace. She looked at him. And you gave me something too. A voice. They stood in silence. Then Elena turned. I want to tell my story. All of it. Richard nodded. The world's ready. The next morning, a video went live. Elena, sitting in a sunlit room, telling her truth. The burns. The betrayal. The redemption. The love. It went viral within hours. 20 million views. And at the end, she said, I was a maid. I was burned. But I became a mirror for every woman who's ever been silenced. And the world cried. Not for her pain, but for her power.